everyone, I'm Kim. I work in social impact, but that's not actually my job description. But I thought it summarizes basically what I do. So basically what I do is help organizations and people do good and help marginalized people have a voice, which is a bit odd given that I should probably practice what I preach, since for the longest time, I didn't feel like I had a voice at all. I was always a bit of a rebel growing up, not the horrid Henry type of vibe, by the way, but I was a bit loud and spoke my mind and challenged any expectations that was held of me. And in Mark Shaler's book and talks, he often uses the hard-hitting question, who stole your voice? Mainly speaking about the fear of public speaking, but I think this rings true how people unintentionally make themselves small and, I suppose complicit with the status quo and not afraid to speak their mind because of certain negative experiences. I think it's important to reflect on these lived experiences and as it helps you build empathy and see life in a different lens. So just a bit about me, I'm a daughter of 2 Vietnamese immigrants who came here in a wave where hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese refugees, known as boat people, fled the Vietnam War. I felt a bit of resentment towards the Eastern values that was placed upon me. A culture that is old-fashioned, patriarchal. Women are seen as like housewives. You should never speak back to your elders. And if you're not bright, then you're seen as a failure to the family. So I always felt a bit conflicted and for being forced to do things I didn't necessarily agree with. And, I could imagine like as an 8-year-old, of course you'll feel a bit bitter, feeling forced to do house chores from an early age and just feel like life isn't really fair, particularly the system and the social constructs around that. This was compounded going to school. So I lived in an area where I suppose like it had one of the highest child poverty rates and highest rates of inequality. But also it's also a place where it has a lot of diversity, which is a bit weird how I actually faced a lot of racism growing up in school. So common racist comments I had was like being called chinky, asking if I ate dog for breakfast, or just, doing kung fu noises and sounds at me. But one of my favorite racial slurs is when people call me slit eyes, because rather ironically, I actually have large eyes. So you could just know that these, kids are just basically using that to make you feel like the other. So this is me, age 11. Believe it or not, this is probably at the peak of my sassiness. And I just felt like at that age, I had a really strong sense of injustice and unfairness because I always spoke back, challenged people, and actually got into a lot of several fights, be it a teacher, parent, or a random kid in the park. But, over time it gets tiring, always fighting your ground. One good thing about growing up in your teenage years is that at one point, kids develop a lot of emotional intelligence and become more, considerate, and basically become less like assholes. So finally I thought, hey, I suppose I won't have as many, I won't have to navigate through this and face all these barriers. But I suppose how very wrong I was. There was a lot more obstacles to overcome. In one of my corporate jobs, I had a senior white man speak down to me because of the way I spoke. So, because I'm from East London, the way I would say water would be water. But this man just kept feeling like he was, kept correcting the way I enunciate. And bear in mind, I had no clue who the hell he was. Like, he wasn't even part of my team. But when I challenged him, he was just like, well, look, I'm just doing you a favor. So I think it's quite evident that over time, all the microaggressions and prejudice that I face would have eroded my self-esteem and confidence. And I suppose it put me in situations where I felt like I wasn't seen or heard or valued as a human being. So I find it quite startling when companies, talk about how they value diversity and inclusion, and that they want people to bring their full selves at work. Isn't that weird that my whole life I was ostracized for being different, and now I'm in a place where people actually celebrate your differences. And I think as we grow older, we don't want to be involved in conflict or be in challenging situations. But I ask you the question, when you see injustice and inequality, do you want to change it or do something about it? It's not just enough to be a bystander. I think you need to actively do something And, you know, because I suppose doing nothing and saying nothing actually speaks more volumes. I think back when all the times when people actually stood up for me and just how empowering it was to feel and see that support. Even a small gesture to acknowledge my struggle and reach out just meant so much. So I think if you see something wrong with the world, call it out, and just talking about it in general shines a light on the issue so you don't have to suffer or let other people suffer. Empathy is a skill that could be honed, just the ability to understand and share the feelings of other people. Society needs rebels, you know, especially more now than ever with the recent news. People who think different, are different, willing to shake things up. Sometimes the system and structures in place often stifles and silences people rather than help them flourish and thrive. We should embrace our identity, experiences, and struggles, and instead see it as a strength and vehicle to stand up to what's right, but also just to have the courage to say something about it. You and I are worthy of having our voice and opinions, no matter what our background is. What we bring to the world is important. So what I want to end is that actually being the other is a good thing. Being a rebel is actually pretty badass. All it takes is a little courage and challenge, and a little courage to challenge and speak up. We are all of value and worth to be seen, heard, and respected. Thank you.